And I'm going to do this in blocks of 4. And the first block of 4 that I'm going to start with is the relegation fodder. And the teams that I think are most likely to go down, and it won't surprise anybody really, because most people, when they look at the league table, they go, who's just come up, they're most likely to go back down again. Of the 3 that have come up, Burnley with 100 points in the Championship clearly seem to be far stronger than any of the others. However, I still think they're going to struggle. I think they're going to struggle. It's going to be a long, hard season, so enjoy the Premier League, because perhaps it will only be one long, hard season. Burnley I'm putting in there, Sheffield United I'm putting in there, and Luton I'm putting in there. Those 3 are going to struggle. Most promoted teams do, unless they have that sort of first season bounce where they do a little bit better. But if that is the case, then they usually struggle the year after. The other team I'm putting in this block of 4 is Forest. I really think that they survived last season just by virtue of other teams being terrible rather than them being good. I don't think that they've signed anyone that you would expect to particularly improve their team over the season either. So I think that they're going to struggle. They may well come a cropper. I would say that there are other teams as well that might get sucked in, and it might just be that once again they survive by virtue of being less awful than others. And the next block of 4, which contain all those teams that might well be awful enough to go down, include Wolves, who are in a lot of trouble. They've just changed managers as well. That other guy, Gary O'Neill, he did pretty well at Bournemouth. I think he was treated a little bit harshly there. Perhaps he can work that same sort of thing again, but Wolves are going to be struggling all year as well, even if he does some sort of superhuman effort. Bournemouth too don't have the Premier League quality to be doing anything more than scraping around and hoping they just do enough to not get sucked into a relegation battle. Next team I'm going to include are Everton. The last couple of years, Everton have been so bad that they almost deserved to go down just as a punishment for being that terrible. However, again, they're one of those teams that survives by virtue of being slightly less awful than 3 others. Pick any 3, and as long as there are 3, Everton will be just fine. However, I think that this year the teams that have come up and are not going to have that sort of new season bounce that others have had in the past. It is more of a rarity than a regularity anyway. So I think that they're going to be okay. I also think that Sean Dyche is the right manager for a team without any real quality in it apart from Calvert-Lewin, and he really needs to stay fit, which hasn't happened much in his career. So the next team that I'm including in this block, and it's probably a little bit harsh, they could have been in the one above, and that is Fulham. I think of these 8 teams that I've mentioned so far, as long as they keep Mitrovic and Paulinho, they're going to be okay, and they're going to be the strongest and least likely to be sucked into a relegation battle of the teams that I've mentioned so far. The next 4 are in the group that I call pointlessly making up the numbers. They're teams that are not going to challenge for Europe. They're not going to get relegated, and Fulham could quite easily have been in there, and the first couple of teams I'm going to mention in that group could actually get sucked into the group below, but I still don't think that they're bad enough to go down. They are Brentford. They had a good season last year. I don't see them having that sort of new energy, that surprise factor again. I think that they are a decent team, but they're a mid-table team. Whether they're 12th or 8th, they're going to be in that sort of group. And I think that applies to Palace as well, as long as they keep the bulk of their team together. Zaha going is a big miss. Obviously, they're going to be hoping the guy from Flamengo, Matthias Franco, they're going to be hoping that he can fill those boots. But it isn't just Zaha's, he has that reputation of being able to produce something a little bit magical. It keeps teams on the back foot. It makes them a little bit wary. Palace do have some decent young players. I think they're going to be fine. And if they lose Michael Olise, which there are rumours that they will, then they could be looking at 12th rather than 8th. The next team I'm including in this group is West Ham. Now this is a bit of a risk given that they were 15th or 14th last year and that they've lost Declan Rice, who was really, really good for them. I'm going to assume that they're going to do something sensible with that money and spend it. But I also think that the players that they had last year, they should not have been anywhere near the league position that they were. So I'm working on the assumption, which is always a bit dangerous with West Ham, that they won't be dreadful again. if you look at the league table for last year, just go by quality, you think West Ham should have been higher. Rice is a big miss. Who will they get to replace him? They need to get somebody, or they're going to be lower than 10th. And the next team that fills out this block of 4, I'm putting Brighton. And I think that as long as they can keep their squad together, obviously the rumours and the stories are that Caicedo is going to go to Chelsea. They've already lost McAllister to Liverpool, so obviously they're going to need João Pedro to step up and do well for them to make up for the loss of that. And if they lose Caicedo, they need to get a replacement in pretty quickly as well. But I still think that they're going to be a decent side. Again, with the Brentford thing, that surprise package is gone now. People are going to be like a little bit more wary of them, and that might help. It might put the opposition on the back foot a little bit, but I think it's much more likely that they're just going to, coupled with a loss of quality that they've had, that they're going to find it a little bit harder this season. They'll be fine, but it's going to be a little bit harder for them. And the other thing for Brighton to be a bit wary of is you hear a lot of people on the internet in the press, generally idiots, going, oh, they have a pipeline, they have a scouting network. When one player goes, they just get somebody in that's just as good. It's like, well, yes, we heard that about Southampton when they were selling Lallana and Luke Shaw and people like that. People are like, yeah, they'll be fine. They've got a great youth system. They've got a great scouting network. They always seem to be able to get a replacement in. Well, look where they are now. And the second team that I've heard that from as well was Leicester City, when they had Mahrez and Kante, and they were selling people like that, and people are going, it won't matter, they've got replacements in, they'll be just as good, they've got a great scouting network, and all that sort of rubbish. So Brighton just need to be a bit wary. It won't happen next year, but you can't be a selling club forever and think you're going to be 8th forever, because Southampton did it a couple of years, Leicester did better for a couple of years, but now they're both in the Championship. So Brighton need to be a bit careful of not believing the hype around them and making sure they're making the good and right decisions, which so far they have, but it just doesn't last forever. So the next block of 4 other clubs that will be hoping for a push for Europe. Some of them obviously will be thinking Champions League, Champions League, Champions League, and rather desperate for it, and others will be thinking, if we can get a Europa spot, then so much the better. A decent cup run, that sort of thing, might get them in Europe as well if they make it to a final. And the first club in this list is Villa. Villa had a shocking start to the season under Gerrard, but they did much better once they changed managers. And I just think that they haven't really lost anyone and they haven't really gained anyone, but I just think that they're going to be really solid, difficult to beat, and a good team. But I just don't think they have the quality to get anywhere near the top 4. In 7th, I have Chelsea. I think that they simply can't be as bad as they were. That probably the previous couple of years, people were giving them too much respect, and that was helping them look better than they actually were. I think that they've been punching above their weight for a while, and then that just caught up with them last year. I think that the signings that they've made will be decent. It's a shame that Nkunku's got himself injured before the season's even started. If that's a sign of things to come, and he's going to miss like big chunks of the season, then they could end up lower. But there's also, surely they're not going to sign Neymar or Mbappe. I just can't see that happening. But it does seem that whenever it's like, oh, he's injured, we'll just go and buy somebody else. So maybe they're going to go out and get somebody in because Nkunku's injured. Maybe they'll just wait for him. But I still don't think that sort of 6th or 7th is an unreasonable prediction for them. They'll be better than last year. Have they got the sort of quality to be pushing for a Champions League spot or better? I just think that the teams above them are just better than them. So there's not a lot you can do about that. And it will pain Chelsea fans to see the prediction, but I actually think that Spurs will finish above them. I think that Maddison, I don't know if he's a better player than Mount, but he certainly looks busier, and maybe that just makes him look like a better player than Mount. But I think that at 40 million, he's a good signing and will help improve their team. I don't think they really lost anything from last year, and I think that like prior to Christmas, before Antonio Conte having a nervous breakdown, they were a comfortable 3rd. I don't see them hitting that height again, because I think that Liverpool and other teams won't be that terrible, but they were a comfortable 3rd. A team that could well be looking at challenging for fourth. I don't think they'll be any higher than scraping into that fourth spot, but I think that sixth is quite a reasonable expectation for them. Much depends on the new manager, but everybody, when he went to Celtic, was like, he's rubbish, who the hell's this guy? And surprised a few there. Celtic were much, much better than expected. If he can repeat that at Spurs, then I think that fifth and sixth is where they'll be looking. Perhaps fourth, but fifth or sixth is more likely. And naturally, if Kane goes and they don't replace him, that could have a big impact on that. Next, I've put Newcastle. A lot depends on Tonali. There's no guarantee with signings from the Italian league. It is a bit slower, a bit softer, and a bit more, perhaps cynical is the word. But for every Di Matteo, there's an Aquilani. For every Zola, there's a Salenzi. So it isn't guaranteed that he'll be a success, but they need him to be because of the amount of football they're going to be playing next year. Personally, I will miss Alan Saint-Maximin. I always liked him as a player, a little bit unpredictable and perhaps uncoachable, which I think is probably why they've let him go. But I really liked him. I found him an entertaining football, so I'm sorry that he's left our league. It's a shame he couldn't find another British club. I don't think they're going to particularly miss him. He wasn't being much of a first-team regular last year. Fifth for Newcastle would represent a really solid consolidation of what they've been doing and the progress they've been making. As they spend more and more and revamp that team, they could actually just sort of start to establish themselves in the top four. But at the moment, I think that that's a little bit beyond them. In fourth, which might be a bit lower than some people have in their predictions, Arsenal. Now, Arsenal last season, and people say they threw the league away, but ultimately at the end of the season, the league table is an indication of pretty much your quality. So that for that reason, people could say, no, Arsenal are going to be second or even challenging again. But I also think that like the end of the season showed that they do have a little bit of a soft touch, and hopefully they'll be banking on Declan Rice to fix that. I don't really know what they're banking on Kai Havertz to do, because it wasn't like we had 6 months of him at Chelsea. We've had 3 seasons of him at Chelsea, and very rarely did he show any quality. It is possible that they're getting the player that Chelsea thought that they were paying 75 million for. If not, he could be that sort of luxury player that unbalances the team a little bit. So there's a risk there. It probably is worth taking if you're second and thinking you want to be pushing on and you want somebody that makes a difference. Because there's no doubt that Havertz has that moment of quality that does change a game, but so rarely has he shown it for Chelsea that I think it was a surprise they went for him. To be honest as well, when you watch him play, it is just a body language thing, but he looks detached from the game and like he doesn't care. And for that, I would be like, I don't really want this guy in my team, let alone like expecting enough of him to push me on to making a genuine championship challenge. Arsenal could well be second. They could well be pushing for the title. But I think that Liverpool are going to bounce back. I think that McAllister will make a difference to them. They needed a bit more energy and life in the middle of the park. There was a degree of like Henderson and Milner being played because they'd been good servants to the club rather than because they were really good enough to help Liverpool get in the top 4 anymore. Addition by subtraction, to an extent. I don't want to disrespect either player because they've both been quality and will probably continue to be for a little while. But McAllister, I think, will make a big difference to them. They'll also be hoping that this guy, whose name I can't pronounce, won't even try to until some of the other commentators in football have had a go at it, they'll be hoping for big things for him as well. They paid a lot of money. And as long as those two guys deliver, there's no reason to suspect that they won't, then I think that Liverpool are going to bounce back to a degree to where they've been the couple of years previous and will be easily top 4, and in all likelihood, I think they're going to be above Arsenal. It does require people like Van Dijk to perform at their best, which wasn't the case last year. Not that he was awful, but he just wasn't at his best. So that only leaves 2, and the last team that I've put in that will be top 4 in my opinion, whether they're better than that and making a title challenge, time will tell, but I've put Manchester United. Manchester United, I think, have attempted to address the issues in their team. It is a shame to see De Gea leave in the way that he did, because he's been a good servant for the league and for the team. But I think that Onana could well be what they needed, just like a more lively, more modern, a stronger character in that goal, not so much of a soft touch. Because you know when you're playing Man United that like any sort of cross that comes sort of onto the edge of the 6-yard box, it's going to cause mayhem in their defence because of De Gea's, I don't know what the word to call it is, it's not inconsistency, he's just didn't quite have that force about him, like the going back to when I first started watching football, Peter Schmeichel, for example, you wouldn't be putting that ball into that area because you know he would just come and take it. But with De Gea, you'd be just put it in there every time. It's always going to cause a problem. So I think that it does address some of those issues, having Onana. I think as long as he adjusts, like if you want to be cruel and talk about goalkeepers coming from Italy to play in our league, United had one of the shockers, didn't they? Taibbi, who actually was far better than he showed in his brief stint with United and actually had a reasonable career. I really don't know what to make of Mason Mount at Chelsea. Sometimes like a really exciting and entertaining footballer, but half the fan base there is like, we've lost nothing by losing him, and the other half are devastated that he's gone. So it's really unsure what United are going to get from him. But I also don't think that, in quite the same way as it was for Chelsea, that if he doesn't play, United don't have somebody that can't fill the boots that they expect him to. If you look at Eriksen at his best and Mount at his best, I don't think there's a significant difference there. The issue is whether how much of his best Eriksen can produce over a season at his age. So I think that between the two of them, they've got a solid midfielder there, and it's going to help them upgrade their team. If they lose McTominay, I would be, and I've heard that Fred might go as well, I'd be like, I wouldn't want to lose both of them, because you still need somebody to come in and be a little bit more defensive minded perhaps in that midfield, and I think that either of those could fill that role. So I'd be surprised if they let both of them go. I'd be surprised, to be honest with you, if I was at United, I would want to keep them both and just have that stronger midfield core to choose from. However, once you've got 6 midfielders fighting for 2 places, you've probably got at least one too many. I don't know anything about the new guy, the forward. They paid a lot of money for him, and I was a bit surprised because it wasn't that they needed an extra body in the final third, but it's just a lot of money. But they need a decent season for him as well, which is again by no means guaranteed. They're also reliant on Rashford repeating that spell last season when he was actually on fire, but perhaps doing that a little bit more consistently, because he definitely went off the boil towards the end of the season. And you think, is he going to be a streaky footballer all his life, or is he going to be what you would call a proper Man United footballer, which is you're on it all the time? Perhaps they just need Roy Keane back to keep him on it all the time. If they do, then United might well be able to push for an actual title challenge. Any one of those 3 teams that I mentioned, and perhaps even Newcastle, could make a challenge for the title, because I don't think anybody expected Arsenal to last year either. I don't think Arsenal are going to repeat what they did last year, but if they do, then I'm all for it, because somebody really does need to make a challenge for Man City. But they just keep on going. Guardiola, the defender, if he's an upgrade on what they had last season, then they're going to be even more difficult to beat, and they were virtually impossible to beat last year anyway. So that's going to really help. Kovacic is just a warm body, an extra figure in midfield. I really don't see what they are expecting from him based on his time at Chelsea. His time at Man United, Real Madrid, everybody says, oh, he won all this and won that. It wasn't like he was the star player in that Real Madrid team. He was a warm body. And he's done that about the same at Chelsea, and that he's been there. I don't see anybody at Chelsea weeping tears to have lost that player. I think they need depth in the midfield, like somebody a little bit stronger to come in when De Bruyne is injured or if he's off the ball, because he's getting a little bit older now as well. He's 32. Kovacic is not going to step in and fill his boots if he misses a game. with the same level of quality. I'm not sure why they signed him, to be honest. And I think the one that surprised me was letting Mahrez go, because like St. Maximin, not always the most consistent of footballers, but unpredictable, weighing in with a goal and putting teams on the back foot sometimes is all you really need from your wide players. They haven't replaced him yet. Perhaps they intend to. I certainly would intend to in their position. They've got he's a good player. He was still doing a job for them. So to lose that and not have a like-for-like replacement in mind, perhaps they think the young players are going to step up, perhaps just more game time for Foden, who's always been in and out of the squad. But again, has he been consistent enough yet in his career to say, actually, I should be playing every week? We'll see as the season goes on, but I think that Man City still remain the team to beat. But I really hope that this is the year that somebody actually can beat them, because if they start winning it every year, then it's like a PSG thing, isn't it? It just is, and it makes our league boring. So we'll see how it goes, and I really, really do hope we have a new champion next summer, but I don't think we will.